Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another Thursday webinar in the Hub. I know that for some people, we're getting towards the end of term. If you're in the Western Hemisphere in the north, then you're probably kind of winding down to the end of the year. And Claire Martine Moloney is here today, a great session to help us reflect on our teaching. But she's also going to give us some practical ideas for things that we can start to introduce at the beginning of the next academic year. So if you are still in full swing in teaching, then these are ideas that you can put into practice straight away. It's great to have Claire with us this morning. She's a well-seasoned conference presenter here in Spain. She's head of studies at a language school in Malaga, and with a special focus on emotional intelligence, positive discipline, and making the classroom a wonderfully comfortable place for students and teachers alike. So I'm going to hand over to Claire, and I'll be keeping an eye on the comments if you want to send us a message.
Hi everybody, good morning on this Thursday morning. Thank you, Teresa, for that introduction. So today what I would like us to have a little bit of a look at is the idea of, while we're reflecting on our teaching, that we're looking for light bulbs and that our brains and our hearts should be in sync, right? So first, a little bit of a reflective practitioner. What is a reflective practitioner? I think that this quote by John Dewey reflects very well what we should be trying to do, which is that we don't learn from experience, but we learn from reflecting on that experience. So something that's really, really important is we have an experience, and then the real learning process starts when we start thinking about what that experience meant. Okay, so the light bulbs today, what we're going to have a little look at are three key elements. Okay, we need a toolbox. Inside this toolbox, we're going to have our emotionally intelligent tools, or our EQ tools. Then we're going to have a look at the process of what being a reflective teacher is, right? And for each of those elements, we're going to look at key components that you can do by yourself or you can do with a peer teacher. And then the last element is some amazing activities that we can have a little look at so that we can get started quickly, right? So those 7 things at the end that are your takeaway. Okay, tools inside our toolbox, right? I love this idea of a toolbox because it's something that you can open and take things out. Okay, so the things that we can take out are these 4. Okay, you're going to see they have codes. We have SA, SM, SA+, right, and RM. We're going to see what exactly they mean. Okay, and those 4 elements together create our emotional intelligence. Okay. So we have EQ is these 4 elements. If we delve into each one, the first one is looking at, self-awareness. Okay, so that's SA is our self-awareness. SM is our self-management. SA plus is social awareness because it's with other people, the self with others, and relationship management. Okay, so that's our RM. Both of these, there's 2 sides to this. The first side is that our self-awareness and our self-management is everything to do with oneself. Okay, so part of reflecting has to be looking for that little light bulb inside of us that we're saying, this is how I feel, how my students make me feel, and how I feel about what I'm doing. And the other side is the social side, that we're looking at how we interact with others and what our relationship means with others. Okay. In the classroom context, this is super important because everything we do in a classroom as a teacher impacts our relationship with our students and their relationship with each other. All right, so that's the social element. Okay, so light bulbs, ready? First, we're going to have a little look at this thing of self-awareness. I think teaching is incredibly important that we understand why we do everything. And part of why we do everything is because of who we are. So this is an individual concept. Okay, this is something that we have to look at ourselves and have an accurate self-assessment of what we're doing. We have to have self-confidence and self-awareness emotionally, things like being able to name our emotions and know what they are. Okay, so if we look at literature The self-awareness comes from knowing your emotions and the impact that they have on your life, having accurate self-assessment of your strengths and your limitations, and then knowing your self-worth and your capabilities. So knowing what you're good at and what you're not good at. I think that that's key in the classroom, that you know what you do well and what you need to work on. Right? A thing here that's very, very important is to be as honest as possible with yourself. There's a difference between being honest and being critical, and it's really important that we don't feed the critic that we have in our head. Yes. So if we're looking at concepts of professional development for self-awareness, right, we have this thing of reflections on your reactions in the classroom. Sometimes we react from a very emotional state. For example, a teacher that has a student that maybe is talking a lot in class, and the teacher feels that they're not listened to. If they're having a bad day, they're going to react in a different way than a day where they feel full of patience, right? That students that resonate with you. So those students that you see as little mini yous, you're going to treat them in a different way than students that you feel you don't relate to, right? So that's something that we also need to keep in mind. Your own baggage and things that are going on in your own life or have gone on in your own life, and how that impacts different age groups that you might be able to relate to, right? And then registering of emotions, that when you're teaching, I think in a class, you sometimes go from 0 to 60, then to 100, then to 80, but you can have a different range of emotions over the course of the hour, if the class is an hour long, and just being aware of those and letting those pass by. Later, it's a very good tool to have a look at and see why you were feeling that way. SMART goals, anything that helps you know where you want to get to. These kind of things are going to impact the teaching, because it's going to help you know exactly in what direction you wish to go, and that when something has gone wrong, because sometimes things go wrong in the class, that you can also give yourself a bit of a break at going back in your head, visualizing what happened and the reaction you had that you wish that you hadn't have had, and then visually fixing it. It gives you a really good sense of peace, and it means the next time you're better prepared because you've practiced the response that you would like. Okay, now these are things that we can do to improve our emotional intelligence in this aspect, which is the self-awareness. Later we'll see exactly what we can do to reflect and do activities that are about reflection directly to the classes that you're teaching, right? So this would be professional development for this aspect. And now we're going to move on to the next thing that's also individual, okay? So another thing that helps is this works fantastically. I've used this with teachers, I've used this with teen students, okay? It's where you name different emotions, and putting a name on a different emotion, it's also that then you can see where emotions go together. This helps your students express themselves better as English teachers. That's what we always want, but it also helps you as a teacher understand more about yourself. It helps you connect better with the people that you work with, because if you can talk about these things, you can then say, okay, well, I was apprehensive, which was a mixture of, you know, fear and surprise, right? So these, and as you can see, there's not positive and negative emotions. We need to try and remove the concept of something as positive or negative. We feel it, we share it, and then we can evolve, right? So if we're talking about self-management, knowing, right, knowing what those emotions are mean that we can manage them better. So the concept of positive, negative, we don't need, okay? We say emotional self-control, that we are trustworthy, that we're flexible, that there's optimism, that we have a sense of achievement, and that there's this thing that gives us initiative. So it's, you know, that's all motivation, all helps us continue when we have those days that are a little bit more complicated, right? So self-management is that we can control impulsive emotions, that we feel that what we're doing is in line with what we want to be able to do, that we can adapt to different situations. You know, in the pandemic, people that had good self-management were able to kind of flip what was going on and kind of say, let's see what we can get out of this. Optimism, that being able to see the optimism of a classroom situation that an exercise hasn't worked the way that you wanted, but say next time is going to be better. My students have tried to help me with this. That our go-to starting point is being optimistic. We can also be realist, but if we're too realist, then we tend to veer towards negativism. What we want is optimism gives us energy, right? This sense of achievement that you say, every day I'm getting better, that your standards are good and that you grow, and that at the end of the year, like now, we say, in September I had this plan and I had this goal, and you might not have reached the goal, because if you put the goal very, very high, you might not get there, but you have gotten better and you can see that you've gotten better. Okay, and this thing of initiative, that even when something is scary, you control those impulses and you try it, right? So you try a new, a new level, you try a new activity, you try something that's completely out of your comfort zone, right? So those would be, this is the premise of what would be self-management, and our professional development here, there's a lot of different things that we can do. For example, this box of the window of tolerance, and if we can be above the window of tolerance, so this is when you're very, very stressed. For example, the last couple of weeks, for most teachers that work in this part of the country, this part of the world, in Spain, right? We would be in this over where we've got so many things to do. There's not enough time. We have maybe sleepless nights because we're working because of reports and all of this kind of stuff. And just being aware that you are outside of the window of tolerance and you're in this hyperarousal state, you know what you have to and what you can do to be able to get back to the window of tolerance. This means that as a teacher, we should try to be in the window of tolerance when we're in our classes, because this is where you can really focus and teach and learn. If you're above or below, nothing goes in and nothing stays, right? Also, an important thing here is if we're in this window of tolerance and students see that we're in this place, right, and nothing kind of phases or frazzles us, then it helps them when they don't understand, when they're feeling frustrated, when something's not working. We are a role model of how to stay within that window, right? So we're also giving them a little bit of like a holistic teaching of how to stay within the window, right? So this thing of how do we stay in the window? It's all of these self-regulation techniques. If you're above, it's things like mindfulness, breath work. One thing that works very well is square breathing, which helps, for example, in an exam situation for students. It helps if you teach them how to do the square breathing. And if we're below, what we need to do is we need to do movement, physical activity. These, this would be, you start class at 4 in the afternoon and your students are half asleep. They're not within the window of tolerance, they're below. They're unmotivated, tired, not ready. So what do? We do a little bit of TPR and we get them back into the window of tolerance. It doesn't have to be a very big change. It's quite complicated for us to stay or maintain the window of tolerance for long periods of time, because it's normal that we kind of go between up and down, up and down. So we need to try and get the students back into the middle. Okay. Now, things that we can do to develop, there's two very, very good, these two videos are fantastic. The first one is a visualization that is about how to create a safe space. You can play it for the students and it's really, really good. It also works for teachers when we are in weeks like these to kind of have a little bit of peace. And this TED Talk is for adults. So this would be, I wouldn't share it either with teenagers. It's a little bit, it has some curse words in it. But it's about why you feel what you feel and being able to understand a little bit more about why we are the way we are and what makes us tick. Even just thinking about this and then talking about it with a peer teacher helps us kind of go, yeah, when this student, you know, teases another student and I have an internal reaction that makes me very tense and I then react to that student, it's because of, you know, when I was 15 and someone teased me and I'm kind of replaying that role in my classroom. The minute we know that that's happening, we can choose an appropriate response. And it also helps us feel a little bit better, right? So this self-management tool is really, really useful. Another thing that works really well is to deal with stress. Any kind of self-management that deals with stress, and this is something that when we are not stressed, we don't need to do. And when we are stressed, if we have not practiced while we were not stressed, then we have a big issue. So how to deal with stress? We need to make sure that we never get the battery to zero. And this is something that, you know, ends up leading to teacher burnout, to moments of the year. Our life in general, teachers, is in cycles. We have the first term and then the first term exams, the second term and then the second term exams, the third term. So we have points of very, very high stress where a lot of work is compacted into a very short space of time. We need to know how we deal with that and how to put in place processes that make those moments of the year that we have more stress less stressful. So one of the things that works very well is making sure that the battery recharges, making sure that we use our classes as a place where we can also recharge, right? And simplifying things. So making sure that we find ways to make that stress more bearable, because it's going to be there. Support from our peers, things that are simplify what we're doing, put in place things like timeliness of making sure that if we know that we have all of these things that we have to do, that we plan effectively. Not planning for our classes, but planning for our own use of our time outside of the class so that it's less stressful. I think part of being a reflective teacher is knowing this about ourselves, seeing what works well for us, and then implementing it, right? So we've worked with, this was the individual part of the emotional intelligence, and now we're going to have a little look at the social part. Okay, so we have the individual, and now we're going to have a look at social awareness and relationship management, which is more applicable to the classroom situation and teamwork situation. So social awareness is having empathy, having organizational awareness of the places where we work and the people that we work with, and then this idea of service, which I think teachers, we like to be of service to others, right? So empathy is understanding, we've looked at our own emotions and now we're looking at others' emotions, our students and other teachers. Looking at the ability of the people around us and how we're all connected when we work as part of a team. Our organizational awareness is, what do the people around me need from me? What do I need from them, right? And then this thing of service, which is so crucial. Every teacher, I think, or most teachers go into teaching because we are people that like meeting the needs of others. So if we fill our glass, then we fill the other's glass better. Okay. Things that we can do here that are super, super important is listening actively. This thing of, am I listening to my colleagues? Those moments where, you know, it's 3:45 or quarter to the hour and everybody's starting the day at the hour. And you have those very small moments of connection where you talk for 2 minutes, they talk for 2 minutes, and then you both go to your classrooms. Those moments are super, super important. Could you say 3 days later what that person had shared with you? Right? So we have to, this is something that for some people it comes naturally and other people need to work on it. Active listening is that you mirror what the other person has told you. You can ask, you can have a look at what your body is doing, the tone of your voice, the tone of their voice, see if they're in sync, right? And if we're looking at how to actively listen, well, we want these 5 elements to be there, right? We kind of say, yeah, this is something that I do. Okay, But are you then looking at how you're doing it and what is working and what is not working? So if you say, you know, this teacher tells me something and then 2 days later, I can't remember. That means that maybe they didn't clarify, or I didn't ask them for clarification. Another thing is, there's nothing wrong with taking notes. If someone tells you something and you feel that it's important enough, take a note of it so that 2 or 3 days later, you have something that you can look at and say, yes, I remember they said this, that, and the other. And the act of writing it down is going to make it that the next time it's going to be easier to remember. You'll be able to go back to the moment and see what actually happened, right? So this thing of am I listening with all of my energy? Okay. Now, active listening. If we have a little look at this picture, I think this is fantastic, because if we're both listening, right? This happens with our students, that if you really listen to what your students are telling you, and everything that they're doing in class is an indication of what they're actually thinking and feeling, right? More good things happen, rather than it just being in one direction. Yes, I think in class we normally have this. When we reach this, there's like a very positive energy to the group, and I'm really hoping that the first one just doesn't happen at all in any class, right? Things that we can do to actively listen better to our colleagues and to our students. The body language. I know that when we're online, body language is difficult to interpret, especially if you don't have a camera. But instead of, for example, I'm talking to you guys right now. If I look at my slides, you guys don't have the feeling that I'm making eye contact. Whereas if I look directly at the camera, then there's the possibility of the student having the feeling that you are having eye contact, right? Things like nodding, things like when you say goodbye, waving to the camera so that there's an indication that this time has finished, right? And in the classroom, it's knowing where you move in the classroom. And we're going to look at an activity that's very interesting about tracking. Your movement within the classroom is very important, okay? Restating, so this thing of, you feel that, and it sounds like you're saying this. If I understand you correctly, you're saying that. This would be with higher level students and with your peers, right? Our teaching peers. Encouragement, making noises, continuing, make people keep going, and then clarify when there's key ideas that you're not 100% sure of, restating and re-asking. Okay. If we're looking at relationship management, when we're looking at relationship management, these would be the key ideas. One of the things that is so fantastic about the Technical Development Hub is that this would be creating quite a lot of these. It has a lot of these components in it, and that's why taking part in something like this is so important, and socially it makes us feel really, really good as teachers. So it's influence, that you persuade others, that you have contact with others, right? That you look for moments where you can be a leader. As a teacher, we're a leader within our classroom, but then when we get out of our classroom, we need to also try and be leaders for our peers. And I think if everybody who is a teacher has the opportunity to be a leader outside of the classroom, we feel more motivated, and then our teaching gets better, right? This is developing others, helping others become better at what they do is a really, really important part of being a reflective practitioner, that you share your knowledge. So this thing of, I do this awesome assignment, I do this awesome task, it's fantastic, my kids are energized. Share it, because sharing it makes you feel good, makes you a better teacher, and it's going to help someone else that is just starting the process or has been a teacher for a long time, and you de-energize them, right? This thing of change, we as teachers we want to change. I think part of what we do is we want to have an impact on other people, and that change catalyst is teaching itself, so that we create moments where people can learn something new, and then that newness can be a change to kind of propel them to something different, like go up a level, yeah. But it can be language-wise, it can be communication-wise, it can be something like confidence, it can be them as people, right? Conflict management, I think there's conflict with every single person that we ever work with. Conflict is not negative. Conflict is not that you have a fight or discussion or a falling out. Conflict is we have a different opinion. I need to try and persuade you that my opinion is correct. You need to try and persuade me that your opinion is correct. And that helps us grow. That in itself is a change catalyst, right? Bonds, maintaining networks. This is a network that you know, TEFL Development Hub are building, and it's, you know, kind of going, it goes beyond academy, it goes beyond Andalusia, it goes beyond Spain. It's just this group that we're a part of. And then teamwork and collaboration, the same. Teams, most critical. Reflecting is a communal thing. We cannot reflect. It is possible to reflect on your own. It's important. It's part of your process. But it's also incredibly important to know that reflecting as a team, the sum of the parts is bigger than the parts on their own, always. But that's my belief. Okay, so sorry, professional development for this, things that know about attachment theory, know how that impacts you, right? We're talking about how you connect with other people and how you feel, right? So there's different types of attachment. You can go into this in the depth that you want personally. You might not need to share this with someone. You can share this with people that you really trust, that you have this type of attachment, or, you know, if you don't have, you know, a secure attachment is what we would try to create within our classrooms with our students, and the type of attachment that we would like to create and foster within our academies, with our teachers, between teachers, between management and teachers, right? But it's that, you know, most adults kind of have a mixture of all of them in different contexts. So it's good to know that about yourself, because it means if you know that you have one of the other types of attachments, you can work and make sure that that does not impact the secure attachment that you have with other teachers and the secure attachment that you have with your students, right? And it might also help you with the other people that are in your life that are in a non-professional context. But professionally, it does work to kind of go, I normally do this and I know why. So then now I know that if this is my tendency, that I have to work specifically to reach this point, right? Another thing that is important here is building relationships that are that can be you as a mentor or you as a mentee. This can be with another teacher, this can be with someone in management, this can be like what we're doing today, where we're, you know, sharing how we feel about this, and we're looking at different ways. You can be the mentor and the mentee at the same time, because there's the possibility of being the mentor in some aspects and the mentee in other aspects, right? Being open and working with the people that you work with the teachers, being the person that's brave enough to say, I'm having this problem with this class. What would you do? Right? Reaching out to a larger community like this, everybody that's watching this now, you're already doing this, right? And thinking of this, that, you know, if we're the mentor or the mentee, and I love this picture because it really helps. I have it in my office. We kind of go, teacher, all of these things. I think sometimes it's not just a job, it's a way of life. It's a way of seeing the world. And it's a way of kind of saying, I identify as a teacher. I'm not a teacher, right? It's part of who I am. And all of these things, it's because being a teacher impacts the people around you. Okay, so we've looked at the 4 different elements. There's a little bit more here. This would be about conflict solution, and this is really interesting as well in the class, because sometimes you need to use different elements. You have 2 students that don't stop fighting with each other. You could try accommodating, you could try collaborating with them, You could even sometimes try avoiding, as in if it's not a very big deal, you kind of look over it. Like knowing where you normally lie on this scale and knowing that you can use these 5 things for different reasons and for different processes, right? So if we're looking at conflict resolution, this is also something that you can use in the classroom, you can use with the people that you work with, you can use with management. And if you practice it enough in the classroom, it starts to bleed into your own life, right? Different ways. This is fantastic. I think this also works really, really well with your students, that you say, oh, we're wearing a different hat. It's kind of based on there was the De Bono and the different hats for thinking, but these are different hats to solve conflicts, right? So it's that when we want to share, we want to have a look at how to solve conflicts within our practice, we can try and have a look at these different ones, right? I like that the alarm one is red because it's the one that we should use the least, right? The other ones, trust is super important. If you have a conflict and you put on the trust hat, you generally can maintain the relationship stays impact, even though you're resolving a difficult conflict, right? And passion, I'd say, is very similar to power, but passion is when you do it from your heart and not from your head. So from my point of view, if you start with the passion hat and the trust hat, and then the other ones come on their own, right? That would be my personal take on which one to start off with. Yeah. Okay, so our toolbox is ready. Yes, we have our tools are in here. This slide, we can't see it very quickly, but they're all in there. Okay, so we have toolboxes ready, and we are ready to think about being a reflective practitioner, because being a reflective practitioner is basically that you are continually evaluating and updating everything that you do, right? So everything that you do, you say, I'm starting, I'm looking at what I'm doing, I'm reflecting on what I'm doing, I'm thinking about it, and every action that I take has a reason. So now we have our toolbox is ready, okay? And the practice is we teach. Fantastic. So you begin, starting point is I teach a class, okay? Then I self-assess what I did in that class. Then I consider the self-assessment that I made. This can be in form of feedback, it can be in the form of asking someone else to look at what I did, right? Then I practice the stuff that I realized that I needed to practice, okay? And then I repeat. So in theory, this shouldn't really start with teach. This is like a circle that once you've taught your first class, it's already started. So if we were to say someone that has never taught a class before, it would be good that they do a little bit of the reflective process before teaching, right? But then normally what happens is, well, this is a continuum. From one class to the next class, this is something that never really stops. What normally happens is, if we don't do this as a conscious process, we kind of go into automatic mode. And there's nothing worse than automatic mode when you're teaching, because you don't improve. There are teachers that maybe have been teaching for 20 years and they've done the 20 years exactly the same, and they're in automatic mode. Another thing is that propels burnout, because there's nothing more soul drenching, burning for a teacher than to do exactly the same thing all the time and not feel like they're improving. So if we use the reflective process, we as people recharge our own battery, right? So one of the things that we can start looking at for the process of reflection, okay, is this thing of at what stage do I do what? So I have a class and I teach my class, fantastic. Then what? Okay, the next thing is a teacher diary. Now, if I say a teacher diary, you know, I know that I've sometimes spoken with teachers that I work with and they go, more work? You go, oh, well, right? This is something that if you're not fully in it, it doesn't really work. This needs to be something that you feel passionate about and you say, this excites me. It makes it that I'm reflecting on what I do. It can be something so simple as 2 or 3 words, or it can be something that is much more complete. Okay, so this is something that the British Council created in 2004, and they're basically questions that are about what can you put in a teaching diary, right? So it could be after the class, it could be at the end of the day, it could be at the end of the week. The end of the week is a little bit different because you normally have forgotten, right? This is something that I would motivate everybody to do at least for a short period of time. If you feel like you can't commit to it over the course of an academic year, say, okay, so in October, I'm going to make sure that I, with one group, I'm going to write a teaching diary every 2 classes, right? And you use these as guiding questions. So you don't have to answer each of them. You can say, okay, maybe for 3 weeks, I'm going to look at the lesson objectives. Did it work, right? Did the students understand what we did today, right? What did they learn or what did they practice? Was it useful? So you can kind of say, I'm going to focus on this block or the activities and the materials. If you look at the first 2 parts of this document, right, we're going to see that this is basically about procedure. It's planning and procedure. Has the class gone well and the materials were effective, right? We can also have a little look at feedback, which is a little bit more personal. We say the students, were the students on task? What were they doing? Did they enjoy it? How much English did they use? Was it what I wanted? And then a little bit about the management. You say, okay, were they the right timing? Was the pace right? Was I clear? Yeah. So we're going from the kind of the big to the more refined, right? And then the last one, if you taught this lesson, what would you do differently? This is the key element with the information of the other 4 items. This is the question that you need to answer. So next year, when I'm teaching the same level in October, what would I do differently? Because sometimes if you don't do this consciously, what happens is you reach the end of the class and you go, oh, I did that class a year ago and I did it exactly the same and nothing has changed. Oh, and you notice the same error or the same lack of coherency or the same problem that all of your students had with the same exercise. If we don't ask questions about it, this is what happens. Okay, so that's the first thing, the teacher's diary. Another thing here that's quite interesting is that this can be a blog, this can be a video, this can be an audio, this can be post-its, this can be anything that you feel good, comfortable with, right? But try it, commit to it in October, November, October, November, maybe not right now, unless you're teaching summer courses and you feel that this is something that would be useful for you. But the questions, the list of questions are really, really helpful. The next process that I think works really well during the teach, right, is this peer observation. Get other people to look at you teach. Get them to talk with you. This is something that I feel is so important that we do this at my school. It's a process that we have like put a protocol and we do it yearly. Now, there's a difference between the observations that management or the head of studies do, right, and this peer observation. And that's something that is really important. This is not to qualify or quantify what someone does. This is purely to give constructive criticism. So it's really important that here there's no sense of being judged and there's no sense of getting a number out of 10 or some sort of thing that's going to impact your job security or the necessity of how well you teach, right? This has to be something that is 100% just about your development as a good teacher, right? So there's like the self-assessment side of the peer observation, and the way that we do this is that there's the observational skills are that you have to do everything with a focused question, right? So one of the ways is that you have a key question that the person observing you has to answer. Not just have a look at what I'm doing. Then we don't get very good feedback. That you look for data in the right places. So there's 3 different ways of looking for data. If you're scripting an observation, if you're counting an observation, or if you're tracking an observation. So scripting would be saying exactly what happens. Counting is counting the amount of times that something happens, right? So for example, if you're looking at questions, you want to see how many questions do I ask in a 10-minute interval of my class? And then you go, hey, can you have a look at this and tell me how many questions I ask? Scripting would be writing down the questions. Counting would be counting all of the questions that they asked. And tracking would be saying, how many of those questions are open-ended questions? Okay, so that the data that we have to ask for has to be very specific. Tame the time. Time, right? So time is for teachers, time is paramount. We really have a thing of we have very little time and a lot to do in a very little time. So stick to a protocol. Have like a very fixed routine that has the timing in it. Teachers, we work wonders with a timing sheet that I have 2 minutes to do this, 2 minutes to do that, 2 minutes to do that, because that's what we do in class. Do that with your reflective practice, right? And descriptive. This is something that happens when we observe. We bring all of the baggage, all of the stuff that's going on in our head, all of our perceived notions of what's going to happen. No, don't try to think what, if you are the observer, don't say, oh, I know what she's going to do now. Oh, I know what he's going to do. He started the activity like that. She did this. Oh, this is what she's going to do. And this, no, you have to go in as a blank slate, because otherwise you end up using your perceived notions, your own experience, and then you don't give good feedback. Okay. And that for this to work, we have to make sure that this is peer-to-peer observation, or for example, sometimes I take part in this as well, and then it wouldn't be as peer-to-peer with some of the teachers, that they know that this is something that is supposed to empower them. This has to be something where you feel, I'm going to grow from this. I'm not going to have someone telling me that I'm not doing my job well, right? Okay, so when we give feedback, right, what we want is this kind of thing, where you have a focus meeting with the 2 minutes, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 2 minutes, 2 minutes, 2 minutes, and you follow this procedure, right? Because then everybody knows what everybody has to do, and it makes it better, okay? It also kind of eliminates the feeling of nerves that happen when you're being observed, okay? And then there's this thing of, if we do a debriefing, what you want to do here is you're going to be telling the person, right? We observed this. What did you see? What did you hear? What questions did you have at the end of the observation? The data about the focus question. So we shouldn't really be talking about everything that went on in the class. We're just talking about what you did, right? And then the data that answers the focus question, right? And then this, I really like the last two, the observed teacher and the observers, right? So it's that this is a symbiotic role. This is the two little people, the two little things that we had earlier that have the figure of 8, you know, the infinity, and they're just connected and they're going in a loop, because the observer gets as much out of this process as the person that's observed, because it's like that wonderful thing when you see someone do something and you go, oh, I'm going to use that in my next class. It's really working. That's going to work for that group and that group and that group. And if you share it with the observed teacher, both of you come out of this like really, really driven with like a sense of this worked for me, right? So when the teachers have done, when teachers, peer teachers have done this kind of observation, then it's good to ask them for a debrief, right? And I'm going to show you an example of that, right? One way of doing this that has to do better time-wise is this. Now that we have cameras in all of our classrooms, because of this online process or the hybrid process, right? This is super, 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 it's a super good tool. And I know I've used the word super frequently in the last sentence, right? This is incredible. It is something that makes our lives, when we're talking about reflective practice, really, really good, because what I find really, really works really well is when we use video, okay, we can do these tiny mini observations, okay, that with the teachers that I work with, we call them teaching moments. So it's 8 to 10 minutes. It's one activity. You get the setup of the activity itself, and then the evaluation of the activity. You try to do it in 10 or 15 minutes, right? And then if you have different levels, you can do the same teaching moment in different levels, in different classes, the same level in different classes, the same procedure, one in October, one in May, one in March, right? And you get this lovely, you get all of this data that then you can compare, contrast, have a look at, reflect on, and come out with really, really good ideas of how to do it better next time, right? So these little filters of teaching moments that are 10, 15 minutes, and then you get other people to look at them and they give you feedback, right? So it doesn't have to be in-person observation, and it doesn't have to be synchronous observation, right? So that creates something that's really, really positive. And then these are the kind of things that then the teachers or peers can say. You ask, did you get some clarity because of this teaching moment? Was it worth it? And then, what have I learned from it? So we're reflecting on, this can be teachers that teach the same level, and they have a look at my teaching moments and another teacher's teaching moments, and then their teaching moments, and they say, ooh, we meet up the three of us and we have a little chat using a protocol so that we stay on target. And then we come up with something like this. Okay, so here we see, yes, they've been doing the task for a couple of times and they like it, so they know how the task works, right? Then what they've learned from it, they've been able to communicate a lot and they found it enjoying and entertaining. So I know that this works. This teaching moment works, I can use it. The teaching moment that doesn't work, I go, okay, let's improve it, right? So if we're having a look at this, okay, the reflection process, there are different phases. We have the initial phase, the developing phase, and the advanced phase. Yes? When we start in the initial phase, it has to be something that's formal, deliberate, it has to be planned, and it's explicitly structured, right? This is because there's a lot of ways of doing this, but if we use this kind of structure, in some of our schools, there might not be this structure. We can create this structure for ourselves, right? Then we start and we say, this is a really important part of being a teacher. This is a really important part of me getting better as a teacher. Then we start to be in the developing phase. We use tools to focus on reflection, the teacher diary, the peer observation, the video clips, the teaching moments, and then the feedback and the thinking about what do I do next. This increases our confidence and makes us feel that we're better professionals. This makes us go, it formalizes that we are officially trying to be better teachers, right? And it is applied across the board. It makes every single part of your teaching process better. And then if you look at the advanced phase of the reflection, is that it's something that becomes seamless. It becomes a part of your, it's like a good habit. It's like I brush my teeth every day. I don't need to think about it. It's seamlessly integrated in my life. This has to be something that you try, that the goal is that you start to seamlessly introduce it, seamlessly have it inside your teaching practice. And then once you know how to do it, then you can start helping other people to do it, right? Okay, so are we good for time? Yes? Okay, so how do we get started? I've given you quite a lot of bits in the different parts of the talk this morning about activities that you can do individually, right? Things about our own personal EQ, and for the different 4 elements, things that you can do that are good professional development. But now I want to have a look at 7 activities that are reflective activities that are very, very specific, the kind of questions that you could ask yourself, okay? So something that's really, really we're going to start off with, these are not in order of importance. Okay, they're all good, and whichever one kind of, you know, moves you the most would be the one that you could start off with, right? So one of the key things when you are observing yourself or someone else is observing you is to have a look at the ratio of interaction. This is teacher interaction with one student, teacher interaction with the group, group interaction with the group, individual student with the group, right? Individual student with individual student. This is where you would be doing counting or tracking. What you want to see here is how much time are you, the interaction that you have with each student and the moments of interaction that they have amongst each other. For example, I feel that it's paramount that if I am in a class with 10 students, that in 1 hour, minimum that I have one interaction on an individual level with each individual student. If I'm not doing that, then I need to see that I'm not doing that and then improve, right? So that would be kind of like an initial goal is to say, am I interacting individually with each student at least once? Then you see that you do it once and you go, yes, now I'm going to try do it twice, right? It also depends on what you're teaching, what kind of class it is, of course. But I think the minimum of one interaction with one student with a group of 10 per hour, I think that that's a good goal, right? If we have bigger classes like 20 or 30, what we need to then try and do is say, okay, maybe I'm not going to be able to have one interaction with each student if I have 30 students. But then what I have to be able to do is make sure that every week I have one interaction with each student, right? If we don't have metrics to follow this, what ends up happening is that you have a group that dominate your time. Okay, so the first thing is we look at the ratio of interaction. Okay, then another thing that we can have a look at, okay, is the growth mindset or fixed mindset. Okay, so this is Carol Duckworth. She's got a lot of amazing stuff. If you want to have a look, you can read for hours. There's lots of fantastic TED Talks. Okay, but this is, are you facilitating growth mindset in your class or fixed mindset? And that you track, you script, you track, and you count. Okay, so it can be when a student is in a fixed mindset, they go, I'm not good at this. How do you react to move them from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset? These would be a really, really interesting thing to see, especially if you have a group that are very demotivated. This would be a good activity for you to say, I'm going to observe myself and see if I am transmitting a fixed mindset or a growth mindset. What kind of language am I using? What kind of way am I moving when a student says, oh, right? One thing that happens an awful lot with teachers is feedback and criticism are personal. That is a fixed mindset. We have to be, when we are correcting, general. In the class, it has to be a generalization, and we don't say, you know, 2 of you have said this. Then we're developing a fixed mindset. Whereas we say, okay, some of us are having issues with this. We're going to review it as a class. That would be growth mindset. Yes. So we have to make sure that we're looking at the 2 of these, and we're pushing our behavior in the class is pushing us towards a growth mindset. Here it kind of goes without saying that if we have a fixed mindset, it's going to be very difficult for us to help our students have a growth mindset. So we need to work on our own thing of going, I'm going towards growth mindset. And another thing that's really, really interesting here, and it's in tiny, but I really like it, is this thing of I'm inspired by the success of others. So we need to create, that's why emotional intelligence is so important in the classroom, because we need to create students that celebrate other students. So competitiveness is a razor blade. We have to be really, really careful that when we create competitiveness in class, we are feeding fixed mindset. It's positive sometimes, but we need to know how to kind of go, oh, when one student or a group of students do a really good job, that the other students celebrate that they've won, or the other students celebrate that they've been successful. Okay, next thing that we could also do, activity, okay? These 3 little ticks. I was wondering to put 2, and then I was like, then it's going to be like, what's up? And I've read it, right? But this is that we have to have consistent corrections. So this is a very good exercise to have a look when you're observing yourself, is to say, have I been consistent? Did I correct in the same way? If something happened last class and I corrected it, and this class it doesn't go well, then I need to correct it. Why? Because we are creatures of habit. Habit makes us feel comfortable. Habit makes us have a growth mindset. When we have things that are routine and habit, we feel safe to try other things. It's also connected to our type of attachment. Consistency creates secure attachment. We need to make sure that when we correct, that if someone has done something that they shouldn't have been doing in one class, that we correct it next class and the next class and the next class. Yes, that we are consistent, but this is also linguistically. If someone is making, we are doing paired work, and we go around and some students are making the same mistakes over and over again, right? It's not bad to mention, oh, last week we had this mistake too, or last week we were having problems with this. Let's try it again. We have to try and be as consistent as possible when we are correcting. Okay, so this is something that would be good as well to track. Under no circumstances should we try to track or observe everything, right, in one session. These are 7 different points, and it's good to have a different one in a different observation, right? Okay, then the next thing, opportunities to respond. So we have to create different opportunities to respond. Okay, this is something really, really interesting to track, because you probably think when you're giving the class that you're giving millions of opportunities to respond. And then sometimes you'll see what you're doing and you'll go, ooh, I'm not giving as many as I thought. Okay, so you have ones that are for the whole group and ones that are individual. One thing that I really like doing for whole group response is we use little traffic lights. It's a way, it's like the response cards, right? They're things that, and it means that you can have them all the time. So you are eliciting responses all the time from the group, right? Okay, then this thing is about what? So here we have, there's 8 different things. This is what you get from doing this, okay? And it's this very important open-ended questions. Okay, so the open-ended questions, as teachers, we need to make sure that we're giving the space in our classrooms to ask open-ended questions. And this is something that is really interesting over a long period of time, to kind of have a portfolio of, you know, different teaching moments that you've done and say, am I getting better at asking open-ended questions? Things like, tell me more, right? What about if this happened? Right? We want the questions that open what the student can tell us. These are highly motivating. They work very well as well with peers, right? It's a way of saying, I'm interested in what you have to tell me. And that works really, really well for students to create critical thinking, to develop critical thinking, to create a sense of, for our emotional intelligence, this is really, really important because it's a way of knowing how you really feel about something, right? And it's these open-ended questions just create these 8 fantastic things. Deliberate choice, brilliant. I get to know myself better, I get to know others better. Decision making, we need these skills. For example, we're all English teachers. I don't know if all of us prepare for, you know, Cambridge exams. These open-ended questions are part of what is going to help your student be successful in the speaking exam, right? So open-ended questions open the conversation. And then one thing that is important, and you know, is a good thing to kind of track when you're observing yourself and you're trying to be a reflective practitioner, is this thing of instructional time versus non-instructional time. How much of the hour, if I were to put it in a graph, was useful? Right? So if I have the hour, and for example, I have, you know, you're going to have a very different set of instructional time for an hour class with 10 8-year-olds or 10 15-year-olds. It's very interesting to track what you do in the whole hour and say, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. And then make a graph for yourself if you wish, share it with someone else and go, how did you do? How much time were you giving instructions? How much time were you getting them to do the exercise? How much time were they moving? How long did it take them to come in and sit down? How much time did you dedicate to routines? How much time were you talking? How much time were they talking? How much time, right? This creates a very interesting tool to collect and then have data, right? Okay, so the next thing that kind of is part of instructional, non-instructional is teacher talk versus student talk. So making your students have the possibility, this is something that you can also do as a very cool graph that you say, how much time was I talking and how much time was the student talking? Those of you that have done a CELTA know that this is something that, you know, it's like teacher talk time, student talk time, the TT and ST, right? So it's that this is something that works really, really well to give you more information. So instead of doing what's on the left, try what's on the right. You know, for a raised hand, then get everybody to answer the question. Yes, that your voice, have them. Don't repeat. Ooh, I love that. No, I'm not going to say it again. I have nominated students that day is going to repeat if someone has doubts. And I changed the student, right? The reading, get the kids or the students to read it all together if they're students that have a low level, partnered reading, so you're not using your own voice, right? And then this thing of you saying what's tricky and then telling the kids or the teenagers or the adults. I find what's funny about that with the tricky thing is that as teachers, we tend to do that with small kids and with adults. And then the teens, we kind of go, off you go, right? So it's that they can try and do it themselves, get them to self-assess. Why is this hard? What are you having problems with? What do you want? What have you done so far to try and fix it, right? So those would be the 7 activities that I would say start off looking at how you can reflect and evaluate yourself with those 7 elements. And I think that that would be a good starting point in September. If you give yourself the 7, maybe 1 a month could be something interesting that you could start looking at and share it with someone else. If you work as a team, have the idea that you can do this in a team, share. Everything is good when we share. The sum of the parts. And we said it at the very beginning, right? But video yourself, if that's the other thing. If you don't have someone that you can do this with at the moment, right? Video yourself and have a look yourself and track yourself and, you know, script yourself and try to give yourself some feedback. But this would be, I think, a really good starting point, and why at this time of the year, this is a very good moment to think about this, because it's something that we can set ourselves up for success for next academic year. So I started off with this quote, and I would like to end with this quote, that it's not the experience itself, it's what we learn when we reflect on the experience that makes us be able to improve. Thank you so much for listening to me. Thank you, Teresa, for having me. I have a short bibliography here that is available. These 2 are really good for the emotional intelligence part. And thank you so much for your time. And if you wish to use any of this, or you want to help, you want to share what you've done, that's my email address.
I learned so much in that session. It was awesome. And I think what you were saying, like, about us as teachers, so much of it was stuff that we could do with our students as well. So like the
Yes.
window of tolerance, making them aware of that. And you were saying about the conflict resolution as well. Yeah, and I like the idea that, you know, you've got these 7 ideas for reflective activities, but you don't need to overwhelm yourself and try and do all of them in one go.
No, definitely not all of them in one go.
Claire and I were chatting before we started the session about, you know, the difficulties of online teaching. And I was saying that I've had some students this year teaching a group of adults, and I just have no idea what they look like. And that thing about the ratio of interaction, I actually kind of had a list of their names for every lesson and made sure that I did nominate everyone, because it's so easy to just pick the people whose cameras are on, because you know they're there, you can see they're engaged, and it's like, no, I've got to make sure that I get everyone at least once in the lesson.
Exactly. The data, with the data you can make better choices, so it's having that data. It's yeah, it's fantastic. But I'm glad that you had the list and that you could show the list, because I didn't have a list to show. So that's really fantastic. Thank you.
Right. I think I need to work on the other 6, but the ratio of interaction I'm on top of. Fantastic. Well, yeah, I'll jump on and share some of those links to the TED Talk, to the YouTube of the visual safe space. But yeah, thank you so much. That was such an inspiring session. And like you say, it's things that we might be kind of too busy to think about at the start of the academic year, whereas if we can start thinking about it now and setting those SMART goals for one thing a month to focus on, or like you say, working with a teaching journal, just with one class for a month, and getting us into good habits for the next year. Fantastic. Well, yeah, if you do have any more comments, drop them in the chat box. You can tag either of us and then we'll be able to respond to anything. And you can always go back and pause the video, and you've got Claire's email there as well. So thank you very much for joining us. I hope you have a good last week of term, Claire. And everyone will be back again in a couple of weeks with another webinar, and we've got coffee breaks coming up next week. Okay, have a good day.